So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us again. I know that this has been, a particularly busy, and potentially fraught time, but it's also been a very successful period for you. You did last week, declare some victory on getting the appropriations process done for the most part, for now, and that many of I guess the worst fears that were out there maybe a year ago and even 6 months ago, and then even less than that, didn't come to fruition, fortunately, and things are in a better place today than they were before. We have SAMHSA seems to be well funded, I think, at around 7.4 billion. It is issuing grants. It's issuing NOFOs, notices of funding opportunities for SED programs. And again, a lot of the potential cuts, even things we heard about a month ago, where the slashing of budgets for SAMHSA was talked about and actually, I think, enacted and then rescinded within a day, something like this. Still a lot of uncertainty, still relatively frequently. And even now, just a few days before we recorded this, there was an announcement of, a new initiative, this $100 million HHS, Great American Recovery Initiative, which I think on its face, is positive that perhaps monies are being allocated. We don't know if is it additional monies that we don't know, and what that might mean. But I wanted to see if maybe we could start by, getting a little bit of the lay of the land and just kind of summarizing, where are we now, today, as opposed to when we talked last time.
Yeah, let's start with the situation we're in now is kind of like one of those Russian nesting dolls, and you got to keep taking them off. And so let's start with the biggest picture. It's funny. I'm looking at myself in this background. I'm not in my regular office. I'm in a different office today, and with the walls not decorated, I feel like I'm lined up for a mugshot. Like all I'm missing is and I kind of feel that's appropriate because we do kind of feel like we're trapped in this really, really demented prison. So let's start with the biggest picture, the budget, the FY20s appropriations and budget. To take it back to, to recap episodes 1 and 2, when the president and the Office of Management and Budget issued their budget request about a year ago this time, things did not look good for SAMHSA. Your viewers will hopefully remember that the plan was to dismantle SAMHSA, dismantle another agency, the Health Resource Services Administration, parts of the CDC, and bring it into what was proposed to be a new agency called the Administration for a Healthy America, taking the time to discuss why procedurally that hit snags. We'll just stick to the substantive and say it did not happen. Because how the budget process works is this. The president makes a recommendation to Congress. Congress then, the House comes up with their own bill. The Senate comes up with their own bill with spending numbers and amounts. The two come to conference, produce a bill, and then it's up to the president to sign it or veto it, which we haven't. I don't think we've seen a veto of a spending bill in decades. I don't remember any in my 20 plus years doing this. So there's a saying that I've said before on previous podcasts: the president proposes and Congress disposes. That's all well and good and accurate when the president and Congress are of different parties. When the president and the Congress are of the same party, it's not automatic. But the president, has their priorities. The House and Senate have their priorities, and you try to come to an agreement. When the president proposed this budget a year ago, he was still, I believe, in close to his first 100 days, still in what we call the honeymoon period. He was riding high pretty well on approval ratings, and members of his party in Congress weren't giving him too much pushback, whether it was high-profile nominees or his reconciliation plan for Medicaid, whatever the case may be. They were kind of saying, okay, we're going to work on this. We're going to give you your wins, so on and so forth. And then we came to the appropriation cycle, which is the budget process. Appropriations is what the Congress appropriates money for the rest of government. There are 12 spending bills. HHS is one of them. And appropriators are a different breed. in Congress. There's a saying, another saying in Washington. There's lots of sayings. We have three types of politicians in this town. We have Democrats, we have Republicans, we have appropriators. Appropriators are a different breed. So for the first few months of the Trump presidency, the Republican leadership was, yeah, we're in step. We want to make sure your agenda gets set, and then you get to the appropriations process. And when this recommendation of a new agency, and not just a recommendation of a new agency, but the casting aside of over $1 billion worth of behavioral health grants. It wasn't just because if they had said we're going to take these grants and put them in this new AHA, I would have to question how much effort we want to put into fighting that. We would have fought it, but that wasn't it. They said we want to take all of these grants and cut them and then open up an AHA. To which we said, no, not going to fly. And to which Congress said, not going to fly. I think the last time we spoke, we had already seen the House and Senate produce bills that said these programs are too important. The services they provide are too important. Our states are too impacted. Not going to happen. So by September, we had a pretty good idea that we were in much better shape than we were in March. Congress was giving a little pushback. The White House didn't seem too fired up to fight on this, and there were other political considerations going on. So then we have the shutdown. It's not finished by September 30th. We have the 6-week shutdown. We have the politics of the shutdown. Finally, there's some kind of agreement. They pass these small, what we call minibus instead of an omnibus, 3 bill at a time spending bills. And then the big spending bill comes up. And it's not only HHS, but it's like transportation and agriculture and defense and Homeland Security all rolled into one. And that was completed on a Thursday or a Friday. And we were like, okay, we got it. All they got to do is get this to the president's desk and we're in the clear, because the president and his advisors wanted this to go away, mostly because of the Department of Homeland Security issues. So if there's a problem with the Homeland Security, there's a problem with the whole bill. And the next morning, Alex Preddy is killed.
Wow.
And my first reaction, I have two reactions. I react as a human being. I say, oh my God, this is awful. And then I react as someone who works in this. And I said to myself, uh-oh, there goes the whole bill. And I was right. And we were all right. I'm not unique. All of us said that. All of us who were, because the Democrats said, hold up.
Okay. This is right.
You know,
Okay. So there's a huge intersection here. And that
right.
yeah. Okay. Okay.
And then the bill had not cleared the final procedural hurdle to get to the president's desk. So the Dems were able to say, we're not funding Homeland Security. No. And then we went through the whole process of they had to pull Homeland Security out and send the rest to the president, which they were able to do. So then the president signs an omnibus bill with the other 5 bills: defense, agriculture, HHS, transportation, and Homeland Security. So when he signs that, we cross the finish line. That's when I posted on LinkedIn, we're done. We are currently in fiscal year 2026. SAMHSA is fully funded. There was a tick here and there, a program here and there that got nicked, a program here and there that got an increase. And like you said, NOFOs started going out for the block grant and the major grants. Yeah, so I think the other day, $700 or $800 million worth of major grant funding was went out to the states or announced to the states. So we're like, okay, however, we're not out of the woods for 2 reasons. You, as the host, can decide which one we discuss next. We can either discuss what happened 3-4 weeks ago with the SAMHSA grants, or we can discuss why we're not out of the woods because the cycle's going to begin all over again.
Yeah. Is this the reconciliation 2 notion?
No. Reconciliation, which was the whole Medicaid thing, without, again, turning this into a civics lesson, the Trump White House, as early as 7 weeks ago, were like, we'd like to try it again. This week, they're singing a different tune. They're like, They see the tea leaves. It's an election year. I'm not being partisan or biased when I say just look at the news in front of you, whether it's polling numbers, whether it's special elections. The Republicans are starting to feel some heat. And while I try to be as apolitical as possible in my work, it does affect my work. And like I said, the political environment between last March and today is very different. And that impacts how hard or easy it is for something to go through. So there's two reasons we're not out of the woods. And I think one of the major things we need to discuss is what happened 3 or 4 weeks ago with SAMHSA. For your viewers, I hope they're informed and know that about, I forgot what day it was. I think it was a Tuesday in January. It starts with a text from a staffer. Hey, you hear anything about something weird going on at SAMHSA? It's like, I haven't heard anything. And I text some people, hey, you didn't hear of anything going on at SAMHSA? And a couple of people like, no. And then one person was like, yeah, I just had a meeting canceled. And my boss was like, white as a ghost. I was like, that's not good. And then we start to hear about letters going out to grant recipients for programs that we call programs of regional and national significance. These are outside the block grant that are for specific municipalities and counties and states that are for targeted work. For example, it could be work with SUD and HIV. It could be work with SUD and homelessness. It could be work with SUD and postpartum issues. It could be work with veterans. These are targeted issues in targeted areas. That's why they're called programs of regional and national significance. And then more letters. Then we started to hear from more grant recipients, more and more. So from 4 o'clock when I got that first text, Eastern, to about 11 o'clock, we got the news that we coupled together because no announcement was made.
That's
That
amazing. I was
over,
gonna ask. So
yeah,
this just started happening. This
this
was
just
being
started
enacted.
happening.
Yeah. Wow.
2,000 grantees got letters that amounted to the termination of over $2 billion worth of grants for mental health and substance use. Now, why? Does the Office of Management and Budget or does the department have this authority? Technically, yes, but everyone got the same letter. Your program or this grant is no longer in alignment with the White House policies and priorities. Substantively, for every grant to get that same letter, that basically means the entire agency is not in alignment
Wow. Yeah. Right.
with the White House policies and priorities. $2 billion, which is basically the entirety of the grant system outside of the block grant, which goes to the states, and the state opioid response grant, which goes to the states. Now, was this a surprise? The fact that it hit us out of nowhere was a surprise. But you'll remember when I said the president wrote his budget back in March, or Office of Management and Budget wrote the budget. These are the exact same programs that they recommended for eliminating. So that kind of lined up, which made us think this is a financial, call it a Doge move. This was one of the Trump White House, we're going to slash the federal government, the size of the federal government left and right, no matter what it is, whether it's labor, agriculture, transportation, we're just going to cut and cut and cut because that was the plan when pen was put to paper for the Office of Management and Budget's FY26 recommendation. So what was cut didn't really surprise me, but these cuts even went beyond. So when the president submitted his budget and recommended the creation of AHA, there were a few very popular, when I say popular, I mean well-established and bipartisan support.
Okay.
There are some really well-established grants that were not touched. Among the most notable, on the drug side, drug courts. And on the mental health side, the Garrett Lee Smith Memorial Suicide Prevention Funds. So what do? We go to Congress, the appropriators. And remember what I said before, here's where it all, kind of comes together. Appropriators are different. When you say to a congressional appropriator, You have a bill sitting there. Remember, I was just talking about the FY26 bill? At this point, this bill was ready to go and be signed. This was in the week leading up to Alex Preddy. This bill was ready. And I had seen the Senate and House and coming up on conference versions that had every one of these programs funded. We went to the appropriations committees, both chambers, both parties, and said, they just said everything you want funded for the upcoming year is not in alignment with their policies and priorities. Is that true? And man, did the Hill step up into
Wow.
action.
Okay.
Appropriators, what we call backbenchers, members who are not on the appropriations committee, senior members, junior members, everybody, the governors were calling the White House.
And let me ask Andrew, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
two kind of interesting things there. At least in my mind, one, and this is a bit of a civics lesson. I apologize, but when you talk about appropriators and that they're a different breed, I mean, who are these folks? And is it like, are we talking about a bipartisan, committee of individuals with various,
who are these
degrees of
folks?
experience? Yeah.
Well, yeah, they are members of Congress. And the way it works in Congress is you get assigned to certain committees by your leadership. In the House, it is either your speaker or, you know, or in the Senate, it's the majority leader or the minority leader. Your party leadership hands out committee assignments. And believe me, appropriations is a plum assignment. Now, the way it works in appropriations is different in the House and Senate. In the House, if you sit on appropriations, you cannot sit on any other committee. That's how much work and how powerful it is. Senate's different because there's only 100 of them. Within those committees, there are subcommittees, one for each of the 12 appropriations bills. So we are talking about members of the House and Senate who sit both on the Appropriations Committee and the HHS subcommittees. Now, luckily for us, these are members who care greatly about this issue.
Okay.
Part of it's luck, part of it's where they're from. The Republican chair of the HHS subcommittee in the Senate, is Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia. If you cut SUD funds from SAMHSA, the delegation from West Virginia has something to say. Believe me, West Virginia has more beds per capita than any other state. It's a
Absolutely.
fact.
Yeah. Yep.
We also have Susan Collins, who chairs the full committee. Very big on this issue. Very supportive.
So
Always
that's
has
good
been
to hear because
supportive.
I guess the question was, there was this, they rose, to the occasion. Sounds like they were interested, but it really is because of they care about the issue. That there is
They
concern
care
about
about
this
the
particular
issue.
topic rather than the fact that maybe the initial bill is being undermined.
Yeah, I won't get into every politician, just like every
Different,
person,
sure.
has different motivation. Shelley Moore Capito, Susan Collins, Patty Murray, who are the powerful senators in this space. Yes, they do care about the issue, but they care about their constituents and the services they receive. So regardless of what it is, they know if they let this go, their phones are going to be ringing off the hook saying, my treatment center just closed. What's up with that? Because I have friends and colleagues that called me that Wednesday, the next morning, and said, I just got fired. Why? Because 90% of our funding was a SAMHSA grant, and we just got a cancellation and said, sorry, got to let y'all go. Now, by the end of the day, 24 hours later, when a letter from the White House went out saying all cancellations are reversed,
Wow.
turns out they weren't fired.
Yeah.
So what made this, and we're gonna put this into the timeline we're living in. What made this bizarre was a couple of things. One, the 2026 bill was about to be signed. All of these programs were about to get we knew for a fact once this bill got to the president's desk, it was going to be signed because we knew they wanted the shutdown was bad politics for everybody. They wanted it to go away. They didn't want any more talk about Department of Homeland Security. Unfortunately for them, that went sideways, but they wanted this over. There was no way this bill was being vetoed. So at the same time, so the president or whoever did this, whatever staff did this, was about to sign a bill saying all these programs are fully funded, but you're not getting the money. So yeah, that's where we were at. That's why it was such a shock. Where I am going to go is this. In addition to, you said caring about the issue, it can go beyond that in some cases. There's caring about the issue, and there's like the issue being everything to you. Tom Cole is a Republican chair of the House Appropriations Committee. He runs the whole thing in the House. It is his. Very senior member, very respected member, works well, gets great reviews for working bipartisan. More important to him than anything else is Indian health. He is part Choctaw, I believe, from Oklahoma. I've been in his office many times. It's like a wing of the Native American Museum. The regalia he has in there is gorgeous, some of the stuff he has, because he's so honored and revered by his constituents and his people and what he's done for them. Among the cuts, well, they cut everything, but among them was a program for mental health trauma in Native American youth. So he wakes up Thursday morning and he sees that this is one of the programs cut. What do you think he's going to say? Well, sucks for them.
Right.
No.
But how is that even happening? I mean, is this is, you know, I guess there's a lot of not normal, you know, happening, you know, at this time. How not normal is this? There was no
This is
communication
insane.
between these constituents.
Well, so this is insane on two levels. And again, those of you who watch this those of your viewers who watch this and watch me are going to know that at the end of the day, every problem for me and most people is broken down into two silos: the procedural and the substantive. Procedurally, this is I've never dealt with this before, ever. To see grants either canceled or what we call clawed back, which we discussed on other episodes, is absolutely insane, especially at the rate they're doing it over the past year. Unheard of. Just unheard of. So procedure has, because I had when this happened 3 weeks ago at what we were calling the Tuesday Night Massacre, you know, people are like, what should we do? And I was like, I don't know. You know, so finally, once we caught our breath, you know, we call Congress and whatever. So that's one. Alternatively, you know, I saw the look on your face when I talked about the programs that, you know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say no one from the administration is watching this podcast. Sorry, Kris.
I
Don't want to
understand.
burst your ego there.
No, I don't have one. That's all right.
If the people who did this had a finger on the pulse of politics, you'd leave these things alone. Like, you know, so you would, you know, maybe you wouldn't go after the programs in Oklahoma or West Virginia or Kentucky where the chairs of these committees sit, you know? It's like,
Yes. Yeah.
so I don't know how Tom Cole reacts if they don't touch that. I think he would have been, you know, because again, he's an appropriator and he's in a, you know, this is no secret. I'm not spilling industry secrets. You could read this in the Post or when there was a Washington Post.
Jeez. Yeah.
You could read this in Politico.
Yeah.
Russ Vought and Tom Cole have clashed. Why? Because Russ Vought thinks he's in charge of the budget. Tom Cole
This is
says,
still the case.
Tom Cole says, power of the purse.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yep. Right.
I remember I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I was in the office next to Tom Cole's when Doge was starting up close to a year ago. And I hear this drumbeat of footsteps coming down the hallway. And if you've ever been in Capitol Hill hallway, they're like these really long, large, spacious. It echoes. It's like hard marble floor, you know, walls and steel ceiling. It echoes. And I hear this like bump, 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 drumbeat of footprints. You're like, there's a lot of people. And I see like a security detail of 12 heavily armed Capitol Hill police and Secret Service walking in, and coming down the hallway in the middle of them is Russ Vought. And he was coming out of a meeting with Tom Cole because I was just down the hall from Tom Cole's office and I saw his face and he looked like not happy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Vought and Cole have always had a contentious relationship because of their responsibilities and their points of view on, you know, where they stand. So that was one of the many straws that broke the camel's back. That, you know, it was kind of a middle finger to Tom Cole because all this contention between Congress and the White House over appropriations. He's the chair of the Appropriations
Right.
Committee,
Right.
and you cut his baby.
Yeah. And this is I had to just jump in a second. It's kind of it's very interesting, on its face to get that insight. I think that there's so much news happening, so consistently, and it's characters like Russell Vought, who you might recognize as being part of the picture all the time, but I think to most people it's like, well, is he still there? Is this kind of thing
Well,
going
he's
on? Is he
there.
Doge over? Like what's happening? And he is there, and so it's kind of a really interesting inside view of geez, this is this is how these kinds of things happen, on a
Yeah,
human.
well, I'm here to tell you what you don't read in the news. That's why I'm here. I mean, I hope, that people who are, want to be educated by your podcast, they're educated enough to read the newspaper and watch the evening news and see what's going on. But yeah, it's we took a lot of time, and we're still taking a lot of time to piece together what happened, because let's move the ball down the field some more. Because a couple of weeks later, the White House announces their Great American Recovery Initiative.
Yes,
And we're like, I seem to remember 2 weeks ago, you weren't that, motivated to promote
sure, that's right.
recovery.
In fact, he cut everything.
Yeah. And, so we were trying to piece together who was behind this, because we've seen similar, right now, we're seeing similar flexes, and we'd seen before. I call them flexes because this is, again, OMB versus Congress. So, was OMB trying to flex, say, we control the money? Like Congress decides where the money goes, but we decide how it's spent, maybe trying to stake out a position that they can reasonably defend. Right after this happened with the SAMHSA grants, it happened with the CDC grants. First, like less than a week later, like 5 days later, they tried to cut the public health infrastructure grants, which goes to the states, hundreds of millions of dollars. And then this week, on Monday, they cut hundreds of $1 millions to 4 states: Minnesota, Colorado, Illinois, and California.
But what an interesting selection of states.
What an interesting selection of states.
Yeah.
No. Uh, so hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, that's CDC money, and this is where it's important to bring this up on this podcast. I know we're focused on behavioral health. We're focused on substance use. We're focused on mental health. Those don't exist in a vacuum. Those don't succeed in a vacuum. No health succeeds in a vacuum. We should be all about whole health these days. We try to be. The grants that were cut impact HIV treatment and prevention, STD treatment and prevention. What else? Behavioral research surveys,
Hmm.
social determinants of health, things like that. It's all comes,
Right. Which
the
is all
number of
completely
people
intertwined and interconnected.
all completely
Yeah,
intertwined,
it's part of
because
the continuum.
those of us who represent people in treatment or recovery have an incredibly high percentage of those patients that need HIV care, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
So it's all comes together. And there was a lawsuit led by the California Attorney General to try and put the brakes on that, as there have been many in the past. For now, I think they got a restraining order. I can't keep track anymore. I
No.
don't know.
Yeah.
At one point, I prided myself on knowing exactly where each of the lawsuits against the administration stood on
Hmm.
funding, and there just got to be too many. There's
Wow.
just got to be too many.
Yeah.
And so, it's so I don't know where
Well,
that's at, but they're
but
they're doing
yeah.
it. They're doing this to CDC. They're doing it with NIH, and they finally got around to SAMHSA. And we were trying to piece together why now. And the only things we seem to agree on, who was behind it, why now? The only things we can seem to agree on is, in terms of the timing, right before the budget, this was probably in the pipeline months ago, and the shutdown delayed it, because you can't, there are rules during a shutdown that give both power to OMB and take power from OMB. So there are rules about what you can, if it's under a continuing resolution, or if it's under a shutdown. I won't get into
Yeah.
the rules and regs, but it makes it difficult.
Sure.
And so it is entirely possible that one left hand in the White House said, okay, I guess we can move forward on this now, not knowing that the right hand was planning this Great American Recovery Initiative. But that's just from a politics and press perspective. Now we need to dive deeper into this Great American Recovery Initiative.
Okay.
We can do that if that's where you want to go.
I'd be happy to do it. I mean, one question that I have is, and I would love your thoughts on that. Briefly, on that initiative. But in the bigger picture sense, I think it's also it's incredible to me, and I think to a lot of people. But it's also this type of vacillation, or we see there's we're clawing back and it's restored, and this has happened in a number of different cases. There's just tremendous uncertainty about an actual policy, and is it being implemented or not being implemented. It seems, I think. And there's also this notion of, and I think you brought this up earlier, like what's happening in the political sphere. It all of a sudden becomes like a normal. Alex Preddy happens, and now it's incredibly unpopular. Let's kind of pull back on that, and it leads to this notion, which is certainly been talked about quite a bit. I think in all over the place, but just the notion of fragility. When it comes to whether it's SAMHSA or just
Yeah,
HHS generally. I mean, we seem to be living in this very fragile state.
that's that's the so interesting. Yeah, you're absolutely on point because this whole SAMHSA thing with the grants being taken back and then reinstated happened within 24 hours. And when it was over, when I got the official announcement reversed, the second thing I did, the first thing I did was collapse in a heap on the floor because 24 it was 24 hours. So I just like I'm at my computer at the I'm in it was at late, it was like 8 at night or something, so I wasn't in my office, I was in my living room, and it comes across my screen, and a reporter said, "Officially reported grants withdrawal." A reporter I happen to know, so I call her individually. I was like, "Don't mess with me. This is 100% confirmed." She's like, "100% confirmed." And I just collapsed on the floor
Man,
because I hadn't slept. So
well,
the second thing I did was I got in touch with all the people I work with, my clients, my colleagues, and I said, "Okay, here's the news. I hope you all know damn well we're gonna have to do this again. Somehow, some way. It may be different. I'm not talking about another letter that goes out." I was like, "They're not done. They're gonna come at us again."
so that's where we are. That's where we are.
That's where
And
we
as you're
are.
thinking, this is, it's not done. So even though the appropriations process is done and the money's allocated and these kinds of things, you just don't know if something's coming out of the woodwork, at some point. And again, I just have to ask, because you've been doing this for, 20 years, is that normal? Like, I mean, would you know, I'm going to assume no,
No.
but
It's so far beyond. It is a you can write chapter and verse. I'd love to hit Powerball tomorrow and retire and say I'm writing a book on politics in the Trump years, the first and the second, because they're some things are the same, some things are different. Washington is a place where just when you think you'd seen it all, you haven't. And
isn't there a little more to see now? I mean, like, what? I don't know.
there's a joke between my friends and I is like, you know how military members of the military get ribbons and commendations for certain achievements, and some include like battle, like if you were at a certain battle or you got at it, you choose it, you get a and like I'm not mocking it, I'm praising it. It's like you deserve that, you've earned it. You like you have been recognized as a hero in this space, and the generals and the lieutenant and the colonels have like chest full. We joke like, can you imagine if we had that? Like, this was the shutdown of '95. This was the omnibus of 2003. This was and we joke like, because we say, I remember the blah 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 of of the blah
Mhm.
I was back here in the year that they did this. So we joke about the different campaigns where we have the scars from.
Yes.
And I can't tell you, like, what to even call what we just went through with these not just this one 24-hour episode with Samson, but the whole past year
You
of
have a
the
chest full of medals. It's a
clawbacks.
chest
Yeah,
full of medals.
like, what we've seen. It's like more than my previous 19, 20 years of
Wow.
what we've
Yeah.
had to go through.
Yeah, yeah. It's incredible, and I give you tremendous credit for the work that you're doing. It clearly made a very, very vital difference, and again, the battle's not over, it sounds like.
No,
Did you wanna touch on the Great American Recovery
I do
Initiative?
want to touch on the Great
Okay,
American Recovery
thank
Initiative
you.
because, again, process substance. This came out in an executive order by the president about 2 weeks ago that there is now a Great American Recovery Initiative. What you have to know about this White House procedurally is 90% of his executive orders, if not more, if not maybe 5%, have no real force of policy behind them. 95% of them say, as president, I say we're going to look into this, which you don't need an executive order to do. You just have your people, but he likes executive orders. Fine. Like the IndyCar race. He filed an executive order saying Washington's going to look into hosting an IndyCar race. You don't need an executive. Anyway, so he issues an executive order saying the following people and offices will form a intergovernmental commission to improve treatment and recovery. And it's all these people like the Attorney General and Homeland Security, Here's the thing. That already exists. It's called the Office of National Drug Control Policy, which is an office of the White House. The Office of National Drug Policies, the Office of National Drug Control Policy's role is to coordinate a federal response to substance use. Now, there's two sides to that coin. There's supply side, which is interdiction and trafficking, and demand side, which is prevention, treatment, blah, blah, blah. This White House, again, I'm just stating facts. This White House has turned the ONDCP into a 100% supply side office. Every single tweet from ONDCP and its new director, Eric Carter, is about interdiction. I have not seen one tweet or statement about treatment. To further that, at the whole press gaggle where he signed this executive order, she did not even speak. She was in the room. She didn't speak. The people that spoke were, I think, Robert Kennedy, Secretary of Health and Human Services. Mehmet Oz was there. I don't know if he spoke. And former First Lady of South Dakota and wife of the current Secretary of the Interior, Catherine Burgum. Catherine Burgum has personal experience. And of all the people involved in this, who I believe are incredibly sincere and have good ideas and want to see this really work, she's probably at the top of the list. Now the question becomes, what do they want to do with this? A few days later, it was announced, the first new initiative of the Great American Recovery Initiative was announced. It was announced by Robert Kennedy that there would be a $100 million initiative at SAMHSA called STREETS. I don't know what the acronym means. When you edit, you can go back and look up and edit yourself in and find out what it means. But it has to do with SUD and homelessness. A noble enough cause. Here are the questions we have. There are already programs at SAMHSA on SUD and homelessness. I doubt this administration even took a look at them and said, what's effective, what's not effective, let's just use what's in place. Didn't happen. 2, $100 million, not that much money. For 8 grants, comes to about 13, 14 million recipient. State, city, whatever. Most major cities, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, spend more than that already on homelessness. Here's my biggest issue, and I know we have little time, but here's my biggest issue. Robert Kennedy has been, ever since he took office on this issue, has equated SUD with homelessness. You watch him talk about SUD, and every single time he'll talk about getting people off the street. It goes way beyond that.
Yeah. Yep.
People with SUDs live in very nice homes, live in mid-size homes,
Of course.
apartments,
Every walk of life.
military barracks, they live all over. And my question for Robert Kennedy, who is open about his past, who has talked about his 14 years as a heroin user, who just yesterday in an interview talked about snorting cocaine off a toilet seat. Nobody has a perfect past. How many days were you homeless, Robert, when you had your drug addiction? Because I'm willing to bet the answer is 0. It is in an attempt to bring this issue forward, he's at the same time perpetuating the stigma we've been trying to fight.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's also, I have to say, what goes along with that stigma, if I can make this linkage, is that idea of connection, being the opposite of addiction, which we hear about all the time. But there's another type of connection that's really important. And it's for people to feel acknowledged, I think, and understood in their work. And so you have this whole apparatus within the government and beyond, of allied professionals in the field. To your point, they've been doing this. We understand the issues. We understand the evidence. We know what works. And it seems as though these two things are not really intersecting. So we have this initiative, and it leads me to the I guess the question of how are people, again, how are people who are doing this and fighting this important battle feeling about what's going on, and
Yeah.
the chaos that's
And
being
there's only
created.
2 more points I wanna
Yeah.
make on this. One, when they made the announcement, they went very heavy on faith-based involvement, which I have no problem with if the person receiving the services is comfortable with that. I don't wanna see anybody forced into a faith-based approach. If your local church or synagogue or mosque or whatever house of worship you choose is a place where you feel safe and you say to your spiritual community, "Can you help me?" I want them to be able to say yes. I will not accept this money is going to all faith-based, and if you want help in this community through these dollars, that's your only choice. So that's one. We gotta see where that goes. 2, they say this is $100 million investment, and we're gonna come full circle back to appropriations. First question for someone like me, is that new money or is that repurposed money? New money means you're gonna put this in the FY20 budget, you're gonna ask Congress for it, you're gonna hopefully get it, off you go. Or are they gonna take money from other grants at SAMHSA, which they're not supposed to do, and say this is now going to the homeless initiative, and those other grant programs are like, "Wait, that was our money," So there's still a lot of questions to answer. I don't want any of your viewers to think that I have already dubbed this a bad approach. I need to know more. I don't know enough about it. I wanna know, how will there be faith-based involvement? How will this money be spent? Where is this money coming from? Who will be involved? And 3, I represent recovery communities. I want them at the table when this is designed. When the blueprint is designed, I want recovery communities at the table saying, "We know what works." You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to say, "Here's something bold and new." We know what works. We just need you to invest in it. And we want to be at the table saying, if you're going to think about our community, here is what works in our community. Because I learned as a very young operative, and here is where we can wrap it up. I started in politics when I was 22. Some say younger because I was, always involved, but like my first paying jobs. My second paying job, I was 23. I was working for a US Senate campaign, and I thought I was the bomb, like, to date myself, I was the bomb, because I'm 23 and I'm working on a US Senate campaign, and I'm driving all over the state to different offices, and I'm like, here's what we need you to do. I learned a very valuable lesson. You don't go into someone's community where they're the leader in their backyard and say, here's what I need you to do. You go to someone's community in their backyard and say, what are you doing? How can we help you make it better?
Yeah.
That's what works. In
Yeah.
politics, and you talked about connections before. When people work together, if you want to be a federal partner in a community effort, what works in your community? Help us make it better. That's the best way forward.
Absolutely. It's great. And I think that's a hugely important insight. And it leaves us, kind of in a place, I think, where I want to congratulate you hugely on the progress that you helped make. I think you were instrumental in helping us get to where we are, which is broadly the protection, I think, currently,
Oh,
as we
yeah,
make
we're
this
on
reporting
defense.
of
If you
SAMHSA.
watch the Super Bowl, if you're a football fan, you learned
Yeah.
a very valuable lesson this year.
Yes.
Defense
Yep.
wins championships, and believe me, we are committed to playing defense.
Yeah. And so more questions remain, as we see. But again, at least for today, it's in a much better place than it could have been. And again, congratulations on helping make that happen. And
Thank you for getting the word out.
yeah, of
It's
course,
important. I want to say how much of a role, the media and influencers played in this whole SAMHSA and this whole bit, like getting the word out, getting the message out. Tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it.
doesn't make a sound. We don't know. Great. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. So appreciate it. Always wonderful talking with you. And and good luck
Thank you.
in everything coming up.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.